Let's kind of go around the SEC with my buddy Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC. Chris, good morning, buddy. How you doing?
Doing good, David. It is game week, finally.
About time, man, right? Like, for us, this offseason has been forever since our bowl game was in November. Not to bring that back up, but it feels like it's been a quick minute.
Yeah, it has been a while, and the thing that's crazy to me, David, I talked about this on my Locked On SEC show today. I can't remember a time where there's been this much optimism around the conference, and I say this on the heels of Mississippi State just announced yesterday they sold out their season ticket allotment for this year. Auburn has done the same. Tennessee has done the same. Alabama has announced all their home games have been sold out. Like, it's been this chain reaction of team after team after team has been announcing, they've sold out their season ticket allotment. Like, they've increased their season ticket allotment and they've sold that out. And the student section tickets are sold out. Like, Kentucky announced they've been sold out. Like, it's crazy. And I'm not saying like buying tickets means, oh, we're going undefeated, but like, I have not heard any pessimism anywhere, David. Like, every fan base I've talked to at SEC Media Days, people who cover the teams, fans of the teams, like, everyone is super optimistic about their teams this year. And I'm just going, wait a minute, like, someone has to be down. Like, someone is not going to achieve what they want to achieve this year. And I get it. The season's about to start and everybody's undefeated. And so, there is reason for optimism, but I just can't remember a time where it's been this much optimism. Like, typically there's at least one or two fan bases who are like, I don't know, man, 6 wins might be it for us, or our coach is on the hot seat. Like, even every Aggie fan I've talked to is like, I think we bounce back this year. So it's just been wild that, there's just so much optimism right now. Maybe that's a good thing.
Talking to Chris Gordy here on TexAgs Radio. You brought up Mississippi State. I wanted to ask you, they're such an interesting team because the conventional thinking would be if Coach Leach were back, people would be saying this is a team that might win 9 or 10 games. They won 9 last year. Why not? The fact that Coach Leach isn't there has some, and they lost some players too. There's no doubt about that. But when it comes to Will Rogers, are you surprised he isn't typically listed as one of the top 2 quarterbacks? Because I feel like it's always Jaden or KJ, and Will Rogers is kind of forgotten.
Yeah, it's so tough. And I've seen a couple of outlets doing their quarterback rankings this week. And it's like, it's so hard to do those things because what are we ranking? Are we ranking on production? Because if we're ranking on production, Will Rogers is among the best. If we're ranking on, we think this guy's going to lead his team to a bunch of wins, well, Carson Beck is going to be right up there at the top, although none of these rankings have Carson Beck in the top 5. So it's quarterback rankings are always very like, what are we really ranking here? But you're right. Like, Will Rogers has been one of the most productive quarterbacks. Like, go look at his stats the last 2-3 years. He's been among the league leaders, not just the SEC leaders, but like all of college football. Nobody's throwing for more yards than Will Rogers, like very few people. So, yeah, it's going to be a very different offense with Kevin Barbay. I think they're going to be way more balanced this year with Jaquavius Sparks back at running back. I think they're going to be a lot more ground and pound. And then that defense, like I keep looking at everybody that they've got on that defense. You got Jet Johnson back at linebacker, Nathaniel Watson. Those 2 guys were the leading tacklers in the SEC a year ago. They're both back at the same school. So like having them back, all the pieces they've got on that defensive line. I love Jaden Crumity is back for another year. Like I keep hearing people picking Mississippi State to finish last in the West and go like 6-6. But I keep looking at their roster going, man, they got too much talent. Like Tulu Griffin was just named, preseason All-American return man. Like, how do they have all these pieces and yet Mississippi State's going to finish 6-6? I know the schedule's tough, but I think they're going to be better than that. I think Mississippi State, like my hot take has been, that's a 9-win team. I don't know where they find the 9 wins, but they're going to shock some people and upset some people, whether it's LSU, A&M. Somebody's going to lose to Mississippi State and look back and go, how did we lose to those guys?
Chris, do you think it's possible at the end of the year we look at the top 2 quarterbacks in the conference, Devin Leary and Will Rogers?
It wouldn't surprise me. I've been very high on Leary. I talked to him at the Manning Passing Academy a few weeks ago. He said one of the big selling points was Mark Stoops telling him, look, we got all these freshman receivers that were studs a year ago, like Dane Key and Berrien Brown. And oh, by the way, we're bringing back Liam Cohen, who was the OC 2 years ago with Will Levis that worked magic. And Kentucky had one of their best offensive seasons, since the Tim Couch days. So, yeah, there was very much reason for excitement for Kentucky and bringing back Cohen with Devin Leary there. I'm still bullish on Carson Beck, though. Like, I look at his arsenal that he has around him. I got a future Heisman bet on him at the Golden Nugget a few weeks ago because Like at the end of the day, Georgia's schedule is weak sauce. They're going to be undefeated. And at the end of the day, they go running back by committee. There's no like one wide receiver that stands out among anybody. Lad McConkey's good. Brock Bowers is great, but we're not giving the Heisman to a tight end. We're just not. Like he'd have to have like 2,000 yards for that to happen. So, I think at the end of the day, Carson Beck is going to be that guy that we look at. And I think he's going to be, he may not win it, but he's going to be in New York at the Heisman ceremony. I do believe, because Georgia's going to be undefeated and everybody's going to look and say, well, Georgia's got to have some rep. And it's going to be this guy who's throwing for like, 3,500 yards and, 30 touchdowns. And I think he's going to be there. So, maybe Will Rogers. I just think Rogers' numbers are going to come down a little bit just because they're going to be more balanced with Barbay calling the plays.
Chris, let's go through some of these ongoing, at least publicly, quarterback battles out there. The one that we cover right now, the Connor versus Max competition. Just your thoughts on how that's going to play out. I think I know your answer because I know most people's answers, but just some thoughts.
Yeah, it's Connor, and I read Olin's piece a few days ago where he said, look, the announcement's coming at the end of this week. It's just that's when Jimbo's made the announcement the last couple of years. It's been around August 26th, so that's we should get an announcement here in the next couple of days. I think there's nothing wrong with it, but Max Johnson is a very experienced quarterback who's played a lot of football, and Aggie fans know firsthand he beat him at LSU, so. This is a kid that can play, and I think his pedigree, his dad, Brad Johnson, like I think they're just trying to be respectful of it and let this thing battle it out. And I do think Max does have some things that Connor doesn't have, and obviously experience is one, but I think at the end of the day, Connor just being how highly touted of a recruit he was, how smart he is, how quick he gets the ball out. I think that's what Olin cited. Like, look, if the offensive line has any issues, give me the guy who gets rid of the ball the quickest. And that's Connor. Now, I don't know if he's going to be throwing a bunch of 60, 70-yard bombs like Joe Milton at Tennessee is, but I think Connor is that guy that can keep taking those steps in his development. I think Petrino's going to build that offense perfect for him with all those weapons, man. I mean, you talk about having an Nia Smith back. I think that still is one of the most under talked about storylines of this offseason in the SEC. Like I keep hearing all these people talk about receivers, and nobody wants to bring up Nia Smith. I'm like, yeah, let's just sleep on him and watch him be top 5 receiving in the SEC at the end of the year. But I do think it's going to be Connor, and I think he's going to be very good. And I was telling somebody on a show earlier this morning, I think we're going to look back a year from now, and we're talking about Connor Wegman as one of the best quarterbacks, not just in the SEC, but in the country. And we're going to be, it's going to be that feeling like, God, this guy's been there forever. It's like we always do when a guy's like a junior in college. But I think it's going to be Connor, and I think they'll make the announcement probably at the end of this week.
Let's do another one here at Bama, which is the biggest TBD. I think it's going to be Jalen Milroe. Some believe it's going to be Tyler Buchner because why else would he come over there? There's Ty Simpson, obviously. Just your thoughts on how that's playing out.
Yeah, I've been told Buchner is out. That was more of just a move to bring in and push those guys that were on the roster. They watched that spring game and said, look, too many mistakes from Simpson and Milroe. Let's bring in somebody just to send a message. Hey, we're serious here. We ain't messing around. Your job is not safe. Milroe has made tremendous strides. A few weeks ago, before they started fall camp, he was down in Florida with some of the receivers working out and trying to develop more chemistry. And from what I've heard, he's kind of cut out a lot of the mistakes, the turnovers, the bad plays he had in the spring. He's looked much better here in recent weeks. So I'm not counting out Ty Simpson. I do think the luxury they have in playing Middle Tennessee, they'll announce Jalen Milroe as he's going to start that game, but it's not going to be he's QB1 and that's that. They're going to play both Ty Simpson and Jalen Milroe against Middle Tennessee. If Milroe starts and he looks great, he'll be the guy that starts against Texas in week 2. But I do think this battle will kind of go into the season. Again, they'll announce Milroe will start, but not necessarily like he's QB1, the competition's over, let's roll. But Milroe, again, that running ability, if you go back and watch the Arkansas game last year, his feet in open field, my God, it's hard to bring that guy down. And all the down talk people talked about Alabama this offseason, if Milroe's the guy, I think he's going to be really good. And, I wouldn't be surprised if he finds himself in the Heisman conversation if Alabama's undefeated or with one loss down the road.
Chris, last one for you. I don't think Ole Miss has made an official announcement with Jackson Dart. I think everybody expects him to be the guy, but does Spencer Sanders have a chance in this conversation?
He has a chance, but if you read between the lines, David, I follow Ole Miss on all their social media channels. Every time they've tweeted out pictures from practice throughout the spring and the fall, Jackson Dart's photo is always like first in pod. Like I'm like, what are we doing here? Is this really a quarterback battle? Why is Jackson Dart's photo always like, here's pictures from practice today and it's Jackson Dart? I'm like, okay, just say he's the guy. Talking with my guys there, they said he cut down so much on his interceptions in the spring. That was the big problem with him last year. He's taking care of the football. He's throwing more crisper balls. So I think it's going to be Jackson Dart. The question is, how bad is this Ole Miss defense going to be? And I think it's going to be bad. They've lost a lot of pieces. Pete Golding coming in, good defensive mind. I just think they're a year away from starting to turn this thing around. They've got recruits coming in next year, but I think Ole Miss, if they're going to win games this year, it's going to have to be those 38-31 type games, winning shootouts, because I think the defense is going to be bad. And again, I think we'll get an announcement here on Jackson Dart probably around week 1.
Can Judkins follow up what he did his freshman year, you think?
He can. I'm shocked how much love he's getting, and how like every first team preseason All-American list, it's Quinshon Judkins first, and like Rocket Sanders at Arkansas is getting pushed to the curb as the second team. And I'm like, wait a minute, these two guys went back and forth all last season as leading rusher in the SEC, and yet it seems like Quinshon's getting all the love. I get it. He was a freshman. It was fantastic. Set Ole Miss freshman rushing records and all that, but I still think when healthy, they want to go running back by committee. Don't discount some of those other guys in that room. Ulysses Bentley, who came over from SMU, who was injured last year. Like, I still think in a perfect world, Ole Miss is rotating backs and getting 3-4 guys production.
Chris, we appreciate it, man. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, David.
Later, buddy.